up, Taiwan? I'm Reece Ayers with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Funding may have been a key factor in Nauru's decision to break official ties with Taiwan. That's according to Taiwan's central news agency, who cited an unnamed diplomatic source. The source says that Nauru had asked Taiwan for around $83 million to cover the gap caused by the closure of an immigration detention center. The country also needed funds to host the Micronesian Games in 2026. Taiwan had begun seeking help from other countries to cover the large sum, but the source says Nauru broke relations in favor of China before Taiwan could give it an answer. With the severing of ties, Nauruan students on scholarships in Taiwan now face an uncertain future. I went out earlier to one of the universities that has several Nauru students to see how the school is responding. Now, when a country severs diplomatic ties with Taiwan, some of the first people to feel the effects of that are students, particularly those studying on scholarships. Now, there are over 50 students from Nauru studying in Taiwan, and 30 of those have scholarships from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Now, whether or not those students will be able to continue studying is still yet to be decided. Now, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has urged any universities in Taiwan with students from Nauru to offer them the care and guidance they need to get through this difficult time. Mingchuan University has a total of 15 students from Nauru, and this school is going to do everything they can to try and help them.
Right now, I think it takes time for them to really adjust their steps and think of what they want to do in the future. Most of them, actually all of them, are the scholarship students, so they need to, consider how they can continue their schools in Taiwan. Sometimes there might be some scholarships, from somewhere else, or hopefully, or their countries might provide some, next steps, for them. Yeah, so we will continue. We will just, try to maintain, have open communications with the students and then take care of them.
Now, Taiwan has steadily been losing diplomatic allies over the past few years and decades. The last one to go was Honduras in 2023. Now, when that happened, Honduran students actually got together, they made groups, they got their parents involved, and they petitioned the Honduran government to try and get funding for them to finish their programs in Taiwan if they so wished. Some students actually chose to go over to China to finish their programs there. Now, once the shock for the Nauruan students currently studying in Taiwan has subsided, they will face similar decisions about whether or not they want to continue their studies here, if they can, or if they want to go over to China to continue programs there. Taiwan's lack of affordable housing is getting worse. As John Van Trieste reports, it's one of the first challenges President-elect Lai Ching-te will face.
Homeownership is slipping further out of reach for many in Taiwan, even though new units like these are always under construction. Fresh figures from the Interior Ministry show Taiwan's lack of affordable housing is getting worse. In the third quarter of 2023, homeowners were spending over 42% of their income on mortgage repayments. Go back just 2 years to the same part of 2021, and that was just 37%. Taiwan has long been an expensive place to buy property. The capital, Taipei, rivals New York in terms of the mortgage burden. But prices have reached a point where some find even the idea of buying a home unthinkable.
应该没有考虑这件事情，就租房子就好了。如果在台北市开销，顶多存1万吧，怎么可能付得起头期款？
And it's not just Taipei. Just 3 regions of the country have housing considered affordable. That's to say that mortgages are less than 30% of income. There's the city of Keelung near Taipei, and then the largely rural Jiayi and Pingdong counties in the south. The case is political, and it was one of the big issues in Saturday's election. For 2 years, the government has tried to crack down on investment properties, something it's blamed for high prices. One NGO advocating for affordable housing says the fact prices are still rising might have cost the ruling DPP around 2 million votes from young people.
就是他买不起，然后他租房子租不好，等社会住宅等不到。我会觉得说，在这个房价的这样的问题没有去解决的时候，你怎么指望我们的年轻人可以买得起？你怎么指望我们今天公布的那个房价指数可负担性可以出来？
That's a challenge Taiwan's next government must face.
The DPP has won another presidential term, and now it has big promises to deliver on.
President-elect Lai Ching-te has promised higher taxes on owners of multiple homes, and he's promised subsidies to help with interest on home loans. While overseas observers look to Lai's China policy, at home it's his housing policy many will be watching more closely. They'll be looking to see whether he keeps his promises and whether his ideas work. Alex Chen and John Van Trieste in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan is revamping military conscription, with the first recruits entering the new program next week. Rick Glauert reports from the Defense Ministry on how longer military service is part of Taiwan's war readiness plan.
Taiwan's military is rolling out its new conscription program. From next week, young Taiwanese men joining mandatory military service will train from 1 year up from the current 4 months. It's all part of Taiwan's big defense reforms, designed to counter China's increasing pressure on the nation that it claims as its own.
目前相关的配套措施等等皆都已经完备。那么目的就是希望能够提升国军的整体战力。
New recruits will learn how to handle rifles, machine guns and grenades, with a $300 bonus for successfully completing this training. The new mandatory military service program is part of a raft of measures designed to counter China, which include boosting defense spending and developing Taiwan's domestic weapons manufacturing industry. The message from Taiwan's government is clear. It will take an all-country effort to keep Taiwan free. Leon Lien, Sam Hui and Rick Glauert for TaiwanPlus.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says he wants China to take part in a peace summit on Ukraine. Zelenskyy has asked Switzerland to host a summit that he hopes can resolve the conflict with Russia. Russia invaded Ukraine almost 2 years ago. China's foreign minister is calling for a peace conference to end the conflict in Gaza. Speaking in Egypt, Wang Yi also reiterated China's calls for a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He will visit 4 countries in Africa in his first overseas trip of the year. For more on Wang's Africa trip, our reporter Louise Watt spoke to Eric Olander, editor-in-chief of the China Global South Project.
Wang Yi is on a trip to Africa and he's visiting Egypt, Togo, the Ivory Coast and Tunisia. Why has he chosen these countries to visit, do you think?
This year's visit in terms of the choice of countries is rather interesting because there are some that make sense and some that are a little more puzzling. What's unusual is that rarely in the 34 years that they've been doing these visits do they go to the same country twice. And this is the first time in my recollection that they visited a country twice, and that's Egypt. Egypt, of course, is very important for the Chinese right now in terms of the Red Sea crisis, the Mideast policy. In terms of Tunisia, Togo, and Ivory Coast, those are a little bit more of a mystery. So Tunisia has very little trade with China, very little loans with China. But the one thing that we are looking at right now is that those are Francophone countries. And what we have seen over the past 12 to 18 months is a sharp decrease in terms of French influence in West Africa. And all of these countries surround and border the Sahel region, where China is now pushing very hard to increase its influence and to take advantage in some respects of the decline in French influence in those areas.
In Egypt, Wang Yi's made some comments on Gaza. He's called for, again, for a two-state solution and for a peace conference between Israel and Palestine. How does China see its role in the Middle East?
Well, I think China right now is really taking advantage of aligning itself with the rest of effectively the rest of the developing world and certainly the rest of the Arab world in positioning itself in opposition to the war in Gaza. It still presents itself as a mediator, but at the same time, we know very clearly that there's a lot of people in Israel who are very frustrated with China's policies, that China has refused to name Hamas by name, much less as a terrorist organization. That's been a point of contention with the Israelis. And we're seeing that again in the Red Sea, where they're condemning the violence in the Red Sea, but never mentioning the Houthis by name. And so they're throwing shade towards the Americans and the British for launching countermeasures against the Houthis, which were outside of a UN mandate. but at the same time not mentioning the Iran-backed Houthis. So you can kind of see in some ways that China is trying to have it all ways to itself. It wants to be a mediator. It wants to organize a conference. It wants to play this role of bringing all the sides together. But at the same time, its politics are very much aligned in favor of the Palestinians, in favor of the Arab community. And politically, that makes a lot of sense. It just doesn't make sense if China wants to be taken seriously as a legitimate mediator.
That was Eric Olander of the China Global South Project talking to Louise Watt. A US container ship has been struck by an anti-ship missile fired by Houthi forces in Yemen. The US Central Command says Monday's attack in the Gulf of Aden did not cause injuries or significant damage. It's the latest in a series of attacks on commercial ships by Houthi rebels in the region. The Iran-backed group says it's attacking Israel-linked ships in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. US and UK forces retaliated last week with airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen. The Philippines plans to develop artificial islands in the South China Sea. The country's military says the project aims to make it easier to deploy troops in areas Manila considers part of its territory. The announcement comes as tensions continue to rise between the Philippines and China, who have competing claims in the South China Sea. Each side has accused the other of aggressive behavior in recent months. Former US President Donald Trump has won the Iowa Republican Caucus. It's considered a critical first step in winning his party's nomination to run in the 2024 presidential race. Trump received over 50% of delegate votes. His two main rivals, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former US Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley, received only around 20% each. It comes as Trump faces mounting legal troubles, including 4 criminal indictments. 2 of those are related to his alleged involvement in trying to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential elections. Police often use breathalyzers to catch drunk drivers, but have trouble identifying users of other drugs behind the wheel. Bryn Thomas looks at how researchers in Taiwan are trying to change that.
It's like a COVID rapid test, only for drug users. Researchers at National Taiwan University are close to developing a new, portable quick drug test. With just a swab of a mouth, police here will soon be able to identify people who've used several common illegal narcotics. It works by identifying the substances the body produces when metabolizing drugs.
毒品进到我们身体里面呢，就会经过身体的代谢途径，所以我们主要侦测的是它毒品的代谢物。那当然有些毒品它可能是在唾液里面，它大部分是保留原形。
Using different tabs, the new test can identify traces of different drugs in just 10 minutes with an accuracy of up to 97%. It can even differentiate between various drugs, like ketamine, amphetamines, and cannabis, and tell if someone has used within the last 34 hours. Its developers hope it will help police quickly figure out if someone's been using illegal substances.
主要会希望可以用在一些路检啊，就警察的路检，或者是像 夜店那种临时可能需要马上就要测出来说这个人到底有没有吸毒的这种场合。
The ability to test quickly may prove particularly useful in making Taiwan's roads safer. While police here are well equipped to test drivers for legal drugs like alcohol, they often have difficulties identifying drivers under the influence of illegal ones.
那警察呢？他在路边做临检的时候，他除了说对这个人验他有没有喝酒之外，那也可以去顺便验他有没有吸毒。如果说你刚吸了毒，可是现在开车的话，就会造成公共危险，酒驾零容忍。那毒驾应该也是要零容忍。
Most people would agree that keeping drunk and high drivers off the roads is important, and researchers at National Taiwan University hope their new test will do just that. Dolphin Chen and Bryn Thomas for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. Finally, today we leave you with this footage of a traditional mass wedding ceremony in Ethiopia. I'm Reece Ayers, take care, and we'll see you next time.